Good morning, everybody. How are you? I am your host, Catherine McCord, and I have with me today Sharon Hurley Hall. Welcome, Sharon.
Thanks, Catherine. So happy to be here. Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So, this is a special shoot off from Career Launch Live. This is not our regular show, that's tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. This is a special episode because it's a topic so important that I felt like it needed its own space and kind of just its own emphasis. So, Sharon, tell us a little bit about our topic today of anti-racism, why it matters to you, and why we should definitely listen to you about it.
Wow. It matters to me. It matters to me personally as a Black woman moving through the world. I've lived in multiple countries. I've experienced racism everywhere. It matters to me for the sake of my daughter, who's biracial, and all my friends and family living in different parts of the world who are experiencing this. It matters because it's way past time that we had a more equal world, right? It's way past time. It feels like this is something that, with all the ingenuity of human beings, we should have resolved by now.
Yes. And Sharon, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Is it me or is it you? Can you hear me okay?
You're breaking up a little bit as well. I am happy to change my mic if you think that's going to help. Give me a second.
Let's see. So I think just it's important. Oop, we lost Sharon. So I think she'll be right back with us. So sorry for the technical difficulties. This is what happens when you do international speaking, because so Sharon is in a different country from myself. So anti-racism is what we're talking about today. And it's not enough. The idea here is that it's not enough to just say, oh yeah, well, we don't want racists. That's not good. You need to actually act in a way that is anti to racism. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I've chosen Sharon because I absolutely love her empathetic approach. Oh, so sorry. We were just having crazy technical stuff. Let's see. Here we go.
Okay.
Now I think we're good. Yay. All right. So
can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I think we're good now. Okay. So we're back. We're talking about anti-racism. So I was saying to the audience that anti-racism is about rejecting racism, right? That's my definition. What's your definition of anti-racism?
It is about actively fighting racism. It's not about being not racist. It's about being actively anti-racist, which I think is something that Ibram X. Kendi says, right? It's not enough to say, oh, I'm not racist. But then what are you doing about it? How are you, how are you fighting racism?
Yeah. How are you actually helping with that attitude?
How are you actually helping? Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, I've had people ask me, okay, well, what do you mean? Like, why is that an important distinction? And my answer, this is about a different topic, but it was, similar kind of concept. And I said, my answer to that was, okay, this would be like saying, I don't believe that, I believe that democracy is the way to go. But then when somebody else comes in and says, hey, no, we're going to have a dictator, you just sit there and go, okay. Yes, no, exactly. It's okay. I'm not really going to fight for that. Like, that's the difference. That's why that's kind of the distinction.
Yes. Stacy in the comments is saying we can't be passive bystanders. Exactly.
Yes.
We actually
we can't.
We have to do something. And you know what we do is different for everyone. Okay.
Yes.
So for example, one of the ways that I fight racism is because I have the gift of writing. So I run a newsletter and I write articles to share my experience so people can understand a little bit about what it feels like to be at this skin and maybe change their minds about how they operate. Some people do it by teaching. Some people do it by protesting. Some people do it by pushing back against trolls and bigots. There are all sorts of ways to do it.
Firing people. That's
Firing people. The only thing that you can't do is just you can't do nothing. I think you can't just
right.
do nothing. And so that is
Right.
the distinction between being non-racist and anti-racist.
I
And the
like that.
reason that racism is so important is because, we're all in roles that we did not choose, right? We're all in roles that we did not choose. This is something that I took from Leah Jovi Ford of Diverse Leaders Group. And, we didn't choose to be oppressed. Nobody chose to be oppressors. We've inherited these roles, but we don't have to live in that space. We can fight that construct that tells us that this is who we are, and we can
Yes.
build something different.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and I've had people say to me, well, I don't have any talents that can help be anti-racist. I don't have the talent. And I'm going, hold on. First of all, I don't know what talent you're thinking this is requiring. But what I mean is, like, I'm not a writer. I'm not a speaker. I'm not, in leadership. That's not my thing. Great. Sorry, my allergies are killing me. Great. So help make sure that the technology you're building is anti-racist, or share something. When you see Sharon's newsletter, share that. When somebody makes a gross joke next to you, go, you know what? No, I really don't appreciate that. That's not acceptable. It's really that simple, is showcasing your integrity. To me, it's that, if you want to be louder about it, like Sharon or I, and Sharon's much more polite with her loudness, I feel like. but
Some people have said, but I do still make the point.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh yeah, beautiful points. And so, if you don't want to do those things, that's okay. Just stop it when you see it. Stand up and go, nope, that's not the thing. Everybody can do that. Everybody
can do that. It's about being active. And the important thing here is, because I know a lot of people are afraid that they're going to get things wrong. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
That is going to happen. But it is far better to take a stance against racism and occasionally make some mistakes than to do nothing and allow racism to just run riot unchecked.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I can't even add to that. I think that's just it. That's just the end of the sentence. So I will go to a second topic because I can't add to that. That was brilliant. So one of the things you and I discussed the other day, as we were discussing this live and kind of prepping for it, are the different styles of anti-racism. So, and I kind of touched on it a second ago. So you have, to at least in my mind, you and Future and a few other just phenomenal humans have this. Sagel's wonderful for this too. Very empathetic and educational approach to anti-racism. And I want to say empathetic, not that you're like, oh, being a racist is okay. No, that's not it. But understanding that somebody else's viewpoint is different, their experiences are different, and kind of working with that. Whereas like I said, I fire people, first of all, if they're it's within my power and you say something racist and we're at a company together, out you go. I have a very zero tolerance policy, and I'm very kind of loud and aggressive about things like that, and or assertive depending on the situation. And there are others like me. You have Mervyn Kennedy McFoy, Madison Butler, Tara Furiani. We're all a little bit more like attack you about it. So we're the feral cats about it, just like, we're going to get you. So
I love having this multiplicity of voices. I think we need all of them. I think we need people because different things appeal to different people. Some people are going to really respond to being raked over the coals, right? And some people are going to respond to being led to see something different. Right. Yeah. And I think we need all the voices. I think we need all the approaches. You can't be anti-racist as someone else. You can only be anti-racist as yourself. So if you have the voice, if you are the kind of person that fires people, if you're the kind of people that is loud and unapologetic, you be that person and use that to fire up change, to make change. And if you are the kind of person that tends to lead people in more gently. Be that person. The important point is that we're all fighting it.
Yes, I agree. And I want to say too, you guys have been converting me slowly. So, and I don't think I'll ever be all the way over to the more empathetic and educational approach. But education, I've always seen a lot of value in. So I do love to teach, and I've learned better how to do that from people such as yourself, and actually Futures Kane has been a huge influence on that as well, and Sejal Thakar as well. So really learning that softer and seeing their perspective and their experiences, because their experiences matter too, and understanding their mindset and kind of coming at it from a softer standpoint. So now the new thing, and it's kind of funny, is I'll go from like super educational to like, okay, now you're not getting it. Now I just hate you. And now, now I'm just going to tell you that you're not even trying. Like, try. And that's what I was going to lead to, is the effort. I think, to your point that you made earlier, effort is the main thing. You're never going to be perfect. I don't think you can be perfect. I don't think that's a thing that humanity is capable of. But it's the effort. It's the trying. It's that when somebody tells you this is wrong, instead of saying, no, I'm right, you go, okay, tell me more.
Yeah. It's the willingness to be open, to be curious, to think about things. It's keep your mind open. Consider that other people have different experiences and may see and experience things differently, and accept that might be their truth, and see where, there's something in that, right? I'm never going to know what it's like to walk around the world as a white woman. Okay.
It's okay.
And equally, other people are not going to know what it's like to walk around the world as a Black woman. So you also have to be prepared to accept that there are things that you're not going to understand, but also accept the truth of those experiences, even if they don't match your experience.
Yes, and that's the thing. I had a brilliant conversation with a friend of mine here locally in Florida. Her name is Veronica Kolobob. Brilliant, wonderful woman, just exceptional human being, and is remarkably inclusive without even meaning to be, which I think makes it even more beautiful. Like just everybody in her life is all different walks, and she does not tolerate ugliness towards anyone. Like, just will not touch, zero tolerance policy. And I was talking to her. She made a comment about, how much better racism in the workplace had gotten. And I said, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. And here's why. And I knew what she was referring to. I did know what she was referring to. And I told her about all of the experiences I've seen in hiring. And she just kind of stared at me and she goes, I can't believe that's still going on. Thank you for telling me. And she goes, I feel bad I didn't know. I said, but how would you have known? And she goes, right. How would I have known? So it's okay that you didn't know, but then listen. But then listen to the things.
Exactly. I think that's so important. I think that's important.
So tell us a little bit about your experiences that lead you to. I know it's a deep topic. I know.
Where do I even start?
That leads you. Well, let's make it a little bit more specific, because I know that is so very broad. But let's say specifically in the workplace, some things that you are with coworkers on a one-on-one level that you have personally experienced that shows you that this is still not okay, or even somebody that something that you're aware of that happened.
Here's the really interesting thing. I mean, I've been freelancing for years, but before that, I lived and worked in England for 15 years in workplaces. And I didn't think of those workplaces as bad necessarily. But, for example, I remember being offered a promotion that came with a certain pay raise. And then I got the promotion, but they decided that I could only get half the pay raise. I remember being managed by people who were less qualified than I was. I remember interviewing for a job with someone, two of us colleagues interviewed for the same job. I was way more qualified, but I saw the double take as I walked into the interview room, and I knew I wasn't going to get that job. And I didn't. Even though on paper and practically, I was the more qualified. My colleague got it. It wasn't even like it went to somebody else. My colleague, and we actually sat down with our CVs, with our resumes, and were able to compare them. Right? That didn't make sense. I've had people, double take because, Sharon Hurley walks in the room and they weren't expecting a Black woman, back in the days before we had our pictures everywhere. Let's see. What
And
else?
let me ask you real quick. So the double take, because I've actually seen this, so I actually do know what you're talking about. But could you describe a little bit more what you mean by that?
That is what happens when a Black person walks into what's typically an all-white interview panel and sees a look of surprise, and they actually sometimes physically rear back a little when they see a Black person walk into the room. And, that does not feel good when you're the person on the receiving end. I can tell you, it does not feel good.
I've seen somebody else experience that, but I myself have not. And I can't imagine. I literally, I've actually tried. I can't, that's just, it's awful. It was awful just to be in that room. So I can't imagine being on that side of it. And it's not even probably the first time that's ever happened.
It's not the first time. It's not the last time. Practically every Black person I've ever spoken to who operates in white majority spaces has experienced this at least once and often multiple times. Getting back to workplace experiences, there's the credentialism, the insistence that as a Black person applying for promotion, you have to have more credentials than your white colleagues. There is the surprise when you actually have some education, right?
Oh, and then that's always weird. I've seen that. Like, what do you mean you're surprised they have a doctorate? Why?
Yes, yes. And then the microaggressions around articulateness. I mean, there's just so much.
I want to ask you too about, because this is one that gets brought up a lot to me working with employee relations type stuff, is the hair conversation. And I don't know how else to refer to it. I feel like that's not the right term, like the hair situation. But that's what a lot of my white colleagues have called this, the hair situation. And I know what they mean. So I don't know what else to call it either, to be honest with you. But so from my perspective, what's happening is people automatically assume, and I will tattle on myself. I once did this to someone many, many years ago, and she called me on it, and I'm very glad that she did. Mm-hmm. It was a good growth experience. But this idea that Black hair is not professional hair, and I want to say, so some styles I can see are a little bit more confusing to someone who's never seen them. Maybe like dreadlocks. Like if you've never seen dreadlocks, maybe you don't understand. I don't know what the deal is. So what are some things that you've seen and or experienced there, and what are your thoughts on that topic?
Now, this is actually a really interesting one, because I've experienced it both in Black majority Barbados and in white majority England. And of course, people experience it in the UK, in the US all the time. And that is because post-colonial settings are settings built on white supremacy. And so those same standards will often apply. So I remember going for a job, and they said, well, if you get the job, you're not allowed to have your hair braided, right?
That's weird.
There are people that for a long time were discriminated against because they had locks. And I'm just going to add that these days we tend to call them locks because the idea is that they were dread is
my apologies.
Another one of those things.
My apologies.
That's okay. And all sorts of natural hairstyles were discriminated against. And so the funny thing about the hair is that you get both things. You get the people that think that these hairstyles are not professional, right? I'm going back to my white majority space context. But then you also get the people who are so fascinated by your difference in hair that they feel that they can just stick their hands in your hair because it feels so different. And then the things that they say are not complimentary. They don't even realize, when you say things like it's like wool, it's not real. It's so, all of that is stuff that was said from the days of enslavement to make as one of the foundations for why Black people were less like human beings and were therefore okay to be enslaved. So that hair thing is really traumatic.
It is. I've come to realize how bad that actually is. And first of all, I want to make the point don't touch other people. Keep your hands to yourself. You were supposed to learn this in like pre-K. So let me just be the first one to tell you, since apparently your parents failed, keep your hands to yourself. Don't
No
touch pregnant
unwanted
women.
touching.
Don't touch women in general, on the back, on the legs,
Pregnant
and
women.
certainly do not touch Black people's heads.
No.
Just don't do it. And trust me. Okay, so my two of my godkids are biracial, and I love nothing more than when my little my beautiful, wonderful little goddaughter comes out of the shower to run my fingers through her curly hair because it's so curly and boingy. And she's so cute because she comes out and it's just so pretty and it's just so fun. I know her and I have asked her if that's okay to do. And that's about doing her hair and putting it like in little ponytails and that kind of thing. And it's so fun. But even with a child, because I even see people do this to children, don't just walk up and randomly touch a child's head that you do not know.
No. And
don't do that.
Can I just add that, don't ask me if you can touch my hair either, if we're in a work setting.
Oh, God, no.
Right? Don't put me in the position of having to be the bad guy because I have told you that, no, I don't find that acceptable. Because I'll tell you that when you tell people no, they look at you like you are being unreasonable in not allowing them to touch your hair, right? And I wrote about this in my newsletter, and I said, if you were a white person working in an African country, and somebody said you had to put your hair in the same way as Black people's hair was, in order to be considered professional, you would consider that unreasonable because your hair does not grow that way.
Right.
Okay?
Duh. Like if you're like, hey, Catherine, put your hair in an afro, I'd be like, no. Or if you said put it in braids, or if you said put it, no, I can't do it. It's physically impossible. It's like, and my hair doesn't even braid properly. My hair is very weird, but you can't, it's not even reasonable to expect these things. And actually, I've been told by some Black women that I know that some of the product that it takes to like straighten and all that is actually uncomfortable for them. They don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Some of the products are quite strong. And not necessarily that good for you, I think, long term.
Right.
And so I'm really happy. On the one hand, I'm happy that more places are just letting Black people wear their hair the way they want.
Yes.
I'm slightly annoyed that one had to have legislation in order to make that happen. That should not have been necessary. But, at the same time, I recognize that it's good to be able to say, well, okay, here's an act. You can stop telling me about my hair now. Okay,
right.
Let's just not talk about it. This has nothing to do with whether I can do my job or not. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. Don't ask me about it. Google is free, people. Google is free. If you want to find out about these intricate cornrow hairstyles and locks,
look it up.
Look it up. There are pictures, there are discussions, there's the history, and there's a bunch of information on why this is not a good question to ask or a good thing to do.
And I want to hit on what you just said too about the history. So this is where I got caught on this once, is our dress code at this particular company said, and this was their term. I thank you for correcting me and telling to call it locks. Okay, so it said no locks, basically, not allowed. And their term was dreadlocks. So I went to one of my employees who came in with I don't know I think there's a specific name for the style where they kind of come out and they weren't like down her back. They kind of came out. I think there's a name for that. But anyway, that's the style that she had. And I came up to her and I said, hey, just so you know, that's out of dress code. And she was so great because she looks at me and she goes, Miss Cat, I know you don't mean to be rude, but this is actually part of my culture and part of my religion. And so this is something that's actually protected.
Yes.
And first of all, kudos to her for saying that to her boss in the middle. Like there were a couple of other people that had kind of walked up at this point. I didn't mean to address it in front of other people, but some other people have kind of walked up at this point. And she did it. And we continued to have this conversation in front of the other people who were also Black, and they joined in and were like, yeah, a lot of people don't know that, blah, blah, blah. And we had a great conversation. So then I contacted our HR. And I thanked her for educating me on that. I had never known that there was actually a religious tie-in to that hairstyle. It's very fascinating for me. So I did what you said. I Googled it immediately and learned all kinds of things about it, and looked at some other hairstyles as well from other cultures that kind of tied in as well. So I emailed our HR. You want to guess what their reply was? We don't recognize that as a real religion.
Of course they did not, because
That's not up to you.
yeah. That does not surprise me, though.
No. And by the way, in the US, we actually have laws where it doesn't matter what they think. If it's like somebody says this is my religious belief, that's just it. But that was rough. That was a rough one. To realize that I had even inadvertently discriminated against somebody. I felt horrible. But then to have HR respond that way when I came to them and said, hey, I know we didn't mean to do this, but this is what's going on. It was very disappointing. And this is a major company, by the way. This is not like some little company. This is like 10,000 employee level company.
I was looking at that Solangel's comment there. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, you did. Solangel.
Yes, about go to beauty school and become a stylist if you really want to touch Black people's hair all day. I love it.
I just read that. That's hysterical. I love her. She's spectacular. That is hysterical. And I love to touch everything. That's part of how I learn. I'm very kinetic, but I don't like to touch other humans. Like I said, like if it's a child and I'm doing their hair or something, fine. But like I don't understand this, like, I need to touch other people. That's my right to do.
And of course, I mean, it's not only hair, although hair is one of the most egregious. There will be people that will come up and, kind of hold your arm, like if they're trying to feel if the black's going to rub off, and will make some commentary on your skin. And, we had centuries where Black people were not allowed, in certain settings, were not allowed agency over their own bodies and persons. And so we don't need that trauma to be reawakened. So be respectful, hands off. Hands off.
Yes, right? Don't touch other people. Yeah. Ew.
And I don't even want you to ask if you can touch it.
No.
Honestly, because honestly, the answer is really going to be no. And I don't want to be put in a position where I feel like I have to say yes to something that feels invasive and is traumatic.
Yes.
So no, don't do it.
So I want to ask you, because this is one that I recently did. I have a friend that I asked her, could I please get something out of her hair? There was something had fallen into it.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing? Or should I just tell her, hey, you have something in your hair, you want to get that?
Well, I'd start with, hey, you have something in your hair. Do you want to get that, or,
Yeah, or I'm glad to get it for you, maybe.
Yes. You have to leave the choice up to them.
Yes, and I did. I said, you have something in there. Can I get that?
Yes.
And that went okay. But yeah, I want to make sure I'm being respectful, because I just realized having this conversation that might have been triggering as well, and not perceived the way that it was intended. So
that one sounds reasonable and respectful.
Okay, good. Because I mean, you never know. Sometimes it's like, okay, well, I think too, sometimes it's what experience they've had too.
Exactly.
Exactly. And it is crazy. And I have heard so you said that about people thinking the black will rub off. So I've, the anti-racism idea and the anti-bigotry in general, and, being a true advocate, you see so much idea that it can be, that there's fear that like something that's not good will rub off. And I've never understood, first of all, what is it about being black that's bad? I understand it's not the same as white, but I don't get it. So could you tell us what are some things that people are afraid of, that they think, you've done a lot of the empathy work. So where is that coming from?
People at the base are afraid that they are going to have to give up some of the unearned advantages that they have taken or inherited. People are afraid that Black people given or, put on an equal playing field are going to behave as white people have behaved for centuries, right? which, you know, is not
Yeah.
borne out if you look at how most Black societies used to operate. Okay, we weren't about the let's come and conquer and you know and take all your land and enslave you and all that kind of thing. And I'm not saying every society was perfect. It was not at all. You know,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the way that our ancestors operated in their own spheres was very different, right?
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of fear about giving up something, right? I'm not sure, you know, because let's face it, you know, the color of your skin should not really earn you a particular advantage or disadvantage. It should not,
No, but it does.
but it
It
does.
does.
And so
And
people that have been used to having the advantage feel like in sharing that privilege, for want of a better word, they're going to be giving something up. But and you know, and maybe they will not get as many unearned advantages, but they'll regain some of their humanity.
yeah. And you know, it's I want to say so two things. So number one, you know, people say, "Oh, white privilege isn't real. I've experienced racism." First of all, no, you haven't. Shut up.
Yeah.
No white person has experienced racism. Maybe if you live like in a predominantly Black or non-white country, like your whole life, maybe you've experienced. I don't know, but but nobody in a majority white country has experienced racism, and that's white. And so the first thing is that nobody in this live anyway is blaming you for being white. Okay,
No.
nobody's like, oh, you tried to do this and you're, you know, no, you're just born to it. Like I have a friend
Yeah.
who was born into a shit ton of money. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not her fault that she was born that way, but she has certain skewed perspectives and she's aware of them, certain
Yeah.
skewed perspectives and things like that. And it just is what it is. But she's learning to not be that way and to realize that, oh, this isn't realistic or this is not something that other people have experienced or that
Exactly.
type of thing. So it's the same kind of concept. It's not your fault that you're white. Cher doesn't hate me because I'm white. I don't
No.
think so.
That's why
Okay.
no, not at all. And that's why I use the term unearned advantage
Right.
instead of privilege. Because I think that makes it clear what it is. You know, by
Yes.
operating in white skin, you have an advantage and you avoid a disadvantage that people that operate in my skin have,
It's
right?
true. Yeah,
And it's
it's
not
true.
something that you earned. It's something that you got by dint of being born in that skin,
Right. Yeah, I didn't
right?
choose to be white.
And that actually applies whether you are filthy rich or dirt poor. You still have that unearned
Yes.
advantage that comes with being in that skin.
That's true. And I've seen it time and again with hiring. I've seen it with lending. I've seen it with all different types of privilege, school admission, which
Yeah.
is crazy. I've seen it
So
just over again.
an interesting thing that we've been doing, I think I mentioned to you last time we talked that I'd started working with a startup called Diverse Leaders Group. And one of the things that we think about is the language that we use. So unearned advantage is one example, and deliberately disadvantaged is the other one, right? So
Oh,
all people who face isms, right,
yeah.
and people who face racism, you know, they're deliberately disadvantaged by systems, by processes, by practices, by people,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's
And it
true.
actually
Yeah,
make
that's
it
true.
make it really easy to understand, doesn't it?
It does. Actually, I like that a lot better. It's better language. And I've often talked about that often language can be a problem because the connotation of certain words and the dictionary definition of certain words, if you use them in a different context, it skews the message and it can be very confusing to
Mm-hmm.
people. For instance, I so when people very first started talking about non-binary in a loud way, I know this is not a new thing, but in a loud way, I had not heard the term binary, non-binary as it referred to humans.
Mm.
And so I called Tara Furiani, or I reached out to her and I said, hey, I'm confused because to me, binary talks about numbers and all this. So why are people using it
Mm-hmm.
to get, you know, to talk about themselves? And we had this whole conversation around that. And I'm not knocking the term binary. I'm just saying. So
Yeah.
but it was confusing because there was another meaning to that. And so when I think language is extremely important. So I love that you're using more specific language, and I like both of those terms. I'm going to try to use those more aptly, because I think that it communicates a lot better what we're trying to say. So when you have someone who has, I almost said unintentional privilege. That's not it. What did you say?
Unearned
Unearned. Thank you.
advantage. Yes.
Unearned advantage. Thank you. An unearned advantage. I like that better than privilege too. I like that better. So unearned advantage. And they need to try, and they're confused about why they need to adjust their behavior. Because if they're saying, well, I'm not racist and I'm not doing these things. So we're talking about how you need to also have action. But why does it matter to them? Like, why is it beneficial to them? Because as a business person, I always am used to pitching to somebody to understand the benefits to themselves, right? So I know what I think the benefits are, but what are some of the benefits that you would tell somebody in that situation?
It matters to them because it allows them to escape that role of oppressor that they did not choose, because that was inherited along with the unearned advantage, right?
Yes.
And they can choose to step away from that and be their full selves without having that historical baggage if they're actively fighting racism.
Right. I think you also get to grow your integrity. That's a big one for me. You get to grow your integrity, and nothing's better than that.
Because, I mean, does your sense of self-worth depend on oppressing other people or continuing the oppression of other people? Because, if so, then that's messed up, isn't it? So I think that anti-racism allows you to step away from that and to actively use that unearned advantage to level the playing field so everyone benefits.
Absolutely. And in business, there's also the addition of you will have a stronger customer base. You will have better employee retention. You will have higher profits. These things are proven. There's multiple studies. Look it up. Harvard Business Review, Forbes.
This is true. Although I feel like, if we have to make a business case for anti-racism,
I know. It's frightening.
It has to be about the human case. It has
to be about the integrity and the ethics. It does.
Integrity, all of those things. It can't just be about the bottom line. This capitalist system is what got us in mess in the first place.
Yes, that's so true. And when people ask me how I feel about capitalism, I'm like, and that's why, because it was not designed this way. So we've actually, excuse the term, but we've bastardized what a capitalism was supposed to be. It's mangled and twisted and ugly. It's not what it was intended to be. Capitalism, as it was intended, much better system than what we have going on now. Right now, it's awful, and I have do a whole show about that. But and I do support business. Just I am a small business owner, so I fully support business. But it's the reason I bring up the business case is that for the HR folks that watch this, and who are having to tell their CEOs, like, it's not just about integrity, it affects the bottom line, because that is how you make that argument. And sometimes the change has to come from someone who doesn't have all of the power. The change has to start in the middle sometimes. And they have to go, hey, person up high, cut it out. This is not okay.
Sometimes it does, but it has to be supported at all levels. People have to be prepared to take leadership, whether they're in the middle or at the top. But we all know that if the person at the top is not supporting it, it's not going to get very far.
Nope.
Right? So it can't just be, hey, you people in the middle, or, hey, you Black people, look after DEI, but I'm not going to give you any money.
Right? Here, random Black person, handle DE&I.
We have to really rethink all the systems and root out the white supremacy that's built into them, right? I mean, you're talking about capitalism. I mean, the minute you started, seeing capitalism as based on human capital, which is basically what happened, then that's when it took a turn, right?
It took a hard left. It took a real hard left.
And you gotta reckon with that whole history of enslavement, of settler colonialism, and all of that, and the systems that resulted from that, the white supremacy that's built into everything because of that. And you've got to say, well, hey, there has to be a better way. There has to be a way to build in more equality. There has to be a way to to build in equity on the route to full equality.
Yeah.
You know, you know, there I saw somebody used an analogy the other day, right? Which was about running a marathon, right? And so, you know, the white person has started the marathon on time, and then they hold back the black person till an hour, you know,
Yeah.
Till an hour after the race has started, and then say, well, why haven't you reached the finish line? I mean, you're in the race.
Yeah. What's wrong with you?
You're in the race. And look,
And
this person that we put in at, you know, half an hour from the finish line has got ahead. You know, we have our Oprahs and all that kind of thing. So you know, it's like no. You actually need to do it the other way around.
Yeah, you're doing it backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and I think too. So a lot of people get they get real fixated on slavery as like the only racism that was actually holding Black people back. And and so I want to kind of clarify that. So even just from my knowledge of history, not personal experience, but my knowledge of history. So think about how recently, even in the US, the Jim Crow laws went away. So there are like my whole family remembers that happening. Like by my grandparents, my mother, you know, people remember these things happening. People remember the March on Washington with Martin Luther King. They remember the Black Panthers. They remember all of that was super recent. Okay.
Exactly.
And these are not like retired people that remember this. These are people still in the workforce and all that remember this. So, and think about that. It took humanity thousands of years to realize that owning other humans was bad.
Yeah.
So so there's still a lot of lingering racism and systems.
Yeah, I have two things to say about that. One is that unless you're prepared to talk honestly about that whole experience of enslavement and own your ancestors' role in it, we're always going to be slightly broken in how we deal with things, and we undermine the systems that have resulted from that.
And stop saying that Irish people were slaves at the beginning of the US too. It's not true. It's been debunked so many times. Stop saying it. It's insane.
Please stop saying it. And in any case, as an Irish person, you still had a passport to whiteness, which my ancestors never did. Anyway, just saying.
Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But yeah,
that's a whole other thing. But so there's that. And then no, it wasn't a long time ago. I mean, you're talking about the US. There are places in South America, I think, where enslavement didn't end until the 20th century.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you know, it is not that long ago. It is not that long ago. I am 5 generations removed from enslaved ancestors. It's less, I think, for people in the US because it was 30 years later that it ended, right? And so no, it was not a long time ago. But we also have to deal with the legacy of that and the systems that have been put in place, right? The way that Black people are often imprisoned for minor offenses in the US, right? Yes. In a bid to actually get more slave labor, right?
Yep. Oh God, don't get me started on that's again a whole other show.
The documentary 13 is a really good watch on Netflix about that, right?
Yeah. Just want to throw out that for-profit prison systems are disgusting, just awful. But anyway,
yes, and that's
a whole other topic.
That's enslavement by another form for many people, because the majority of people in those systems are Black.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. It's a huge disparity.
The willingness to criminalize Black people and Black children for minor things that white people can get away with, to feed into that system. Right, the willingness to kill Black people, all of this results from that original system. So you can't just say you can't not deal with that as well. You have to deal with it all.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's the origin story sort of how we got to this. So we were here, and then and what people have to remember is that just because slavery ended doesn't mean that racism and those same feelings ended. They
No.
absolutely did not.
No.
And so it was passed down, right? And so people are having to fight what they were taught with what's happening in the world and what they maybe know should be the case.
And people
And
are
so
passing it down now.
Yeah.
People are passing it down now. So you have all these young men with guns setting out to go to black areas to shoot people. You see, that is not the past. That is the present.
Yeah.
So we still
look at Amun Aubrey. Look at that. I mean, good God, the man was in his own neighborhood. Jesus. I mean, that was the most, and the fact that, well, that's again a whole other discussion. When people go, oh, justice, they went to jail. That's not justice. In my no.
No.
It's just
from being killed for the color of their skin.
Yeah. It still happens. I had a young man about a year and a half ago. So think about how recent that is. A year and a half ago, who told me, I talk to candidates all the time. And he told me, he wanted to relocate. I said, oh, okay. Just, why? Just so I know like where to send you. Like, do you want to be by a beach, warmer weather, colder weather? What do you want? And he goes, I can't live with the nooses on my street anymore.
Wow.
What? I thought I misheard him. And so I said, I'm sorry. Would you mind repeating that? And he said, I can't live with the nooses on my street. They put nooses up because they don't like that my family and I and our other neighbors live here. Year and a half.
Yep.
In the United States.
Yep.
So when people, and I've seen, the Klan has very visible presence in some areas of the United States still. Yes. And I mean, like, they have buildings and meetings. Yes. Like, this is, so people need to understand what that means. Oh, and I also want to just shout this out, that our Republican convention, this is not a general bash on Republicans, but this is fact. Our Republican convention just invited a man to speak who was the Hungarian prime minister, and he has overtly talked about white supremacy in his own country and supporting it multiple times. And they invited him to speak at CPAC.
See, it's so
you just invited in racism. Just woo! Let's just have it speak at our big political convention. That stuff is still happening. So this is very serious.
I think a lot of people, particularly white men of a certain era, are just afraid that they will be found wanting if they allow Black and brown people to show the excellence that they have had to show in order to survive.
You know what? I think you're right. No, I think you're right. I think you're completely right. But you know what's so stupid about that is that when you elevate others, and it's not about pushing yourself down. I want to be real clear. Nobody's saying push yourself down. We're just saying don't stop other humans. Don't mush them down for no reason. You wouldn't. It's not acceptable behavior. And when you welcome others, really great things happen. Really great. I've personally experienced this. It's made difference in my success in business to use this mentality and to elevate others and to listen to others and to welcome them into your realm. And so you don't lose, you gain. You
Absolutely.
Learn so much more, you grow so much more, products grow more, people grow more. You and I were talking about the show, The Orville, that we both completely love, probably for the same reasons. And Seth MacFarlane, same guy who does Family Guy, American Dad, all of that, brilliant man. And he's devised this world where everybody is seen on a level playing field, and where it's the idea that what makes you rich in their world is not your money, but your contribution.
Yes.
And I love that. And it talks about the old racist ways and all of that. And it's just beautiful.
And you'd want to really, you just long for that world where all of this racism is behind us.
Yeah. No hate for LGBTQIA, no hate for women, no.
Let's face it, if Black people were valued for their contribution, they should be the richest people in the US.
You built it. So I like physically built it. So I mean, even now,
people, all the people whose land was taken away from them, those are the people that should be the richest. Anyway.
It's amazing. And one of my favorite entrepreneurs, most people don't even know who she is, and it just kills me. But one of my favorite historical entrepreneurs is Mary Ellen Pleasant, who was a Black woman who was, by today's standards, a multi-billionaire, ran all these businesses, was involved in politics, brought people out of slavery. She was a phenomenal human. She was able to do all that, by the way, because she looked white enough to pass. And so they just didn't know she was Black. But this woman did so much to further industry, politics, and to squash humanity and to elevate women, that it's just, she's extraordinary. And most people have never heard her name. And so I want to hit on, when you hear, oh, we don't want critical race theory taught in schools.
Yeah.
That's who you're missing out on. And it angers me because people like that are being left out. And I went to one school where they actually taught very fairly. That was in San Antonio, Texas. I really feel like they taught very fairly. But then I moved to Waco. And they would only teach Martin Luther King, not Malcolm X, Black Panthers, any of that. They would only teach other, they wouldn't teach a lot about the women's movement. It was
and I bet they only taught I Have a Dream and not Letter from a Birmingham Jail either.
Absolutely, which I knew from my first school. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I learned that from my first school. So I was like, you're missing some stuff here. Go back. And it was awful. And we had a comment about the educational system. So I want to comment that nobody is saying that they're going to teach that white people are bad, or that men are bad, or whatever in the world it is that you're so afraid of. They want to teach history accurately. They want to talk about the truth about what happened with Indigenous peoples, the truth about Jim Crow, the truth about slavery, the truth about, that was the other fun thing. So the second school would talk about how nice the slave owners were to their slaves.
Oh, of course.
But you owned another human. There is no niceness. That's not.
Nobody wants to talk about the slave owning past of the founding fathers.
No.
Nobody wants to talk about that kind of thing.
No.
And you have to tell the stories, and also you have to tell them from the perspective of different people, right? I think I mentioned to you when we were talking before. So I went to school in the Caribbean, and my parents, who were born in the Caribbean when they were still colonies, so technically British, and they learned British history, and they learned very little about whatever happened in the Caribbean. By the time I came along, I learned a little bit more about the Caribbean, but it was still from history books written by white British men. My daughter was able to learn history from books written by Caribbean historians, and surprise, surprise, there's much more detail and much more context.
Right? And I love that. I went to a school when I was young that was part of a college, but it was for elementary school kids. And we would have speakers from every experience. And you would have people that, that you would have Japanese people talk about their World War II experience. You would have Jewish people, German people come speak to us about that. We would have Black people talk to us about the 50s and the 60s. We would have just all these different groups. And it was so cool to have all those perspectives given to us. And we had Indigenous people come and speak. And that was such a cool experience. I want that for every kid, because that was amazing. That was amazing to hear from all these different humans.
I think that, this is why we need to decolonize education. This is why we need to tell all the stories from the perspectives of all the people, and not just the same old stories that we've been hearing for the last several centuries.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Teach
history accurately.
Yeah, exactly.
Teach English accurately too. Good grief. There are non-white writers that are good. Just a side note.
So many.
So many. And Maya
We
Angelou,
have,
God
we
love her,
have,
and she is amazing, is not the only one.
no. We have in the Caribbean, we have 2 Nobel Prize for Literature winners, as far as I'm aware.
That's amazing. That's cool.
Yeah. V.S. Naipaul and Derek Walcott, who's a poet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
And
so
yes.
It's sad.
I do want to make one more point, actually.
Please do it.
I always like to bring this global perspective. It's also it's worth remembering that enslavement was something that happened to people in multiple places, right? So it happened in the Caribbean, and in fact, where I am in Barbados was often the point in the triangular slave trade that people, the enslaved people were shipped from here to the US. I learned some interesting things as well. When Virginia was doing its slave code, it based it on the Barbados one, which was apparently one of the harshest ones at the time. Yeah. And so there are all kinds of ways in which that is a shared experience for many Black people, wherever they happen to be now.
It's true,
right? If descendants of enslaved people in the Caribbean, in England, in the US, and potentially in other parts of the world. And that's also part of telling the whole story.
Yes, it is. Yes, exactly. Think again more globally and understand that it's not just here. It's not this little micro problem.
Yeah.
It's big. And so I want to, as we're wrapping up, I just want to say that I really appreciate you coming here and talking to me and to us about this very important topic. And so I want to wrap up with A, tell people where they can find you, and B, tell people, give them kind of your final thoughts about what they can do to further anti-racism and anti-anyism.
Okay, so I'll start with, you can find me on my anti-racism newsletter, which is antiracismnewsletter.com, and also at diverseleadersgroup.com, where we're working on building equality for all. In terms of my final words, do something, right?
That's so great. Just do something. Pick a thing.
Do something to fight racism. Take steps to further your own education. My newsletter is one place, but there are many other people on LinkedIn and elsewhere, providing educational resources and talking points that you can learn from. Go out there and further your own education. Use Google. Follow, Black and brown creators and activists who are talking about this and who might actually be able to make up for some of those gaps in education. Yes. Because, quite often we know these things. I often have conversations with white friends and they said, oh, I didn't know so-and-so. And I said, well, I wasn't taught it, but I learned it like 10 years ago kind of thing, right? So, we live in a world where all this information is available. We should take advantage of it. And then don't just read and learn, do something to change things wherever you are. That can be sharing the education you've got with your white friends. That can be interrupting microaggressions. That can be making opportunities for Black and brown colleagues in the workplace.
Exactly.
So many ways.
But do something. Ways. And I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, use that unearned advantage to make a more equitable world for everyone.
Yes, do something.
Do something.
So thank you very much, Sharon, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please connect with Sharon. She's absolutely a phenomenal human and wonderful educator. Be great, everybody.